Well, Afghanistan has long been known as the world's largest producer of opium, and now the country's resume is expanding. The United Nations Drug Agency says the war-torn country is also the world's top supplier of cannabis, otherwise known as marijuana. Well, RT correspondent Marina Portnaya is in our New York studio, not far from the UN. Marina, poppy crops, now pot crops. Any land left in Afghanistan where flowers or untainted plants are growing?
I'm not sure about that, Priya, but if there are flowers there, I'm not sure how much profit would be seen. Now, according to the UN, the profit that was seen in 2009 due to the production of cannabis in Afghanistan is estimated to be somewhere as high as $94 million. The UN has released a report basically from their drug agency indicating that each year anywhere between 25 and 60 acres of cannabis is being cultivated. Up to 3,500 tons of cannabis produced each year out of Afghanistan. Now, according to this report released by the UN Office of Drug and Crime, most of the cannabis, or as we call marijuana, hash, pot, pick one, is being smuggled out of the country. But this report indicates that evidently opium is not the only problem within Afghanistan. Poppy crops is not the only issue to be paying attention to. Obviously, there's new drugs that are on the rise, and the rise of the way that they're being produced.
So, Marina, who's profiting from the drug production?
That's the most obvious question to ask. And according to the UN report, production and trafficking of these drugs, such as cannabis, opium, is taxed by the property landowner, can we say, those who control the land. Now, according to this UN report, most of the lands where these farmers are cultivating, producing cannabis, is controlled by the Taliban. So the UN says that the Taliban is taxing the farmers and the drug smugglers and using millions of dollars of that tax money to then fund militants that are then in turn working and fighting against U.S. and NATO forces. And this is an issue that UN officials, those that have come out from the drug agency, say that it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be given much more attention, because this is a way that profits are being seen. And now with opium and cannabis, Afghanistan producing the most of both of those drugs, the country and those who are profiting will continue to grow.
And, you know, Marina, you mentioned before that when we think of Afghanistan and drugs, we generally think of opium, not necessarily marijuana. Mm-hmm. Is the growth of cannabis in Afghanistan ever expected to outpace the growth of opium?
Well, Priya, according to this UN report that was just released, the issue with cannabis is that it doesn't cost much money. It costs about 3 times less to produce than it costs opium to be produced in Afghanistan. And it could be done a lot quicker, and it could sell for a lot more money. But the issue here is that it requires a lot of water for the plants to grow, which Afghanistan lacks, essentially. It doesn't have enough water. And also it has a short shelf life. So while cannabis is being produced very quickly and profits are being seen, it's not expected that it would outpace the amount of opium that is being produced, the amount of poppy crops that are essentially being grown and cultivated in Afghanistan. So to answer your question, no. But obviously both of these productions of both opium, which then proceeds to be cocaine, cannabis, marijuana, are clear issues.
And Marina, the United States has spent billions of dollars fighting the Taliban, and there's still a heavy Western military presence embedded in the country. One would think that at the very least, drug trafficking would decrease. I mean, why hasn't it?
That's a very logical way of thinking. You know, after $262 billion spent on a war that you're still fighting, you'd think the U.S. would at least, stand in the way of the drug trafficking. One of the reasons that is being given, according to the New York Times, is that in an effort to win over the trust, the hearts, the minds of the Afghan people, at least in Marja, the New York Times says that U.S. and NATO commanders are arguing against opium eradication, the eradication of these farms. And that is because 60 to 70% of the livelihood from these farmers in Marja is based on what they're growing in terms of opium. So it's sort of a catch-22. They want to obviously rid the drug problem and the drug trafficking of what's taking place in Afghanistan, but they also want to earn the trust of the people in Afghanistan. So in Marja specifically, the New York Times is indicating that the U.S. and NATO forces are backing down from eradicating these poppy crops and these farms where opium and cannabis is being grown. But according to the UN report, it's being grown in 17 out of the 34 provinces in Afghanistan. So it's a fine balance. And of course, if money's being made, to fight against the U.S. doesn't help. And if the drugs are being smuggled outside of the country, even all the way to the U.S., it doesn't help the U.S. in either way. So it's a catch-22.
It's Marina Portnaya reporting from our New York studios. Thank you.